any parent, let's just say, learns transferable leadership skills becoming a parent and managing a household.
Welcome, mompreneurs. This is your host, Angela Mischuli, with a Good Enough Mompreneur podcast where we talk about everything business and motherhood minus the perfectionism. Welcome back. I am so glad you're here, and I am so excited to bring you this podcast episode today because I have a conversation with an amazing change agent for small businesses and also expectant moms in a way that probably many of us have never really thought of because we just accept maternity leave for being difficult. And Alyson really shed some light on how we can take control of that process and that time that is so critical to us as mothers and parents, and really make it a special time that is less stressful. A little bit about Alyson. She's the founder of Master Maternity Leave and the Master Maternity Leave Signature Course. She has spent the last 5 years as a small business operations consultant in her company, Operations Agency, helping streamline the back-end ops for a multitude of brands. Since entering motherhood, her mission is to help small businesses and mompreneurs realize maternity leave as an opportunity, not a setback. Before becoming a mom, Alyson had never taken more than a week off from her business, nor did she want to. However, she knew she had to change something in order to prepare to take some time off and augment her day-to-day to fit her new lifestyle when she returned to work post-baby. Shocked at the lack of structured information available regarding planning maternity leave for female business owners, she decided to lean in and document her experience prepping, executing, and returning from maternity leave twice in 17 months. Alyson found that few small business owners had a plan of action for how they handled tasks, cross-training, and shifting responsibilities for expecting parents. They shared that this led to parents returning to work with lots more on their plate than when they had left, team members bothering them while they're out on maternity leave with emails and meetings, and even early returns. Alyson made Master Maternity Leave a series of resources for mompreneurs and small businesses with expecting employees. Her goal is to use her skills as an operator to help centralize the company's procedures and training and create overall transparency internally, so that when someone goes out on leave, team members know how to shift and accommodate. Alyson now runs Operations Agency, a bustling home with 2 young sons, and helps expecting entrepreneurs prep for this massive shift in life and business. So without further ado, here is my interview with Alyson Caffrey. Hi, Alyson. Thank you so much for being here today. And I was thinking about having this conversation with you, and I just want to say that that is one of the most amazing things about having a podcast is it just facilitates important conversations with people who are doing amazing things. And I think you are doing that because part of my mission is to empower women in motherhood and business. And what you do is preparing women for one of the most critical times of their life, whether they're an employee or an employer. And so I think that that is so super important. And we need to do as much as we can to help get rid of those stresses for women so they don't have to choose between being a provider or their career or tending to themselves or their families, because I think it's absolutely possible to do all of those things. And you demonstrate that with the right planning, right?
Mhm.
So, and it's just not a one and done thing. It's like every time you have this major disruption in your life or you have a child, like there's another readjustment. It's not something that just because you did it once, it's not just for your first child, that there's a lot of stresses every time that you incorporate a new member of the family and you have to like be this, superhuman. So I just love that you developed this business from finding a solution to a problem that so many women have. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Angela. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I know that was a little bit of an intro. So why don't you tell us about your babies? Because I think we have, as mompreneurs, we have our human babies and we have our business babies. And sometimes, we forget to think about that and talk about all of our babies. So yeah.
Yeah, of course. I'm Alyson Caffrey. I'm the founder of Operations Agency. That was my very first baby, born back in 2017 when I took the leap from my 9 to 5 to follow my husband's military journey and move duty stations, and was kind of forced out of my role in my organization. And so I started taking on some ad hoc work and doing some fractional COO work, and Operations Agency was just born out of need. I was serving clients. I was booked solid in the first month. After leaving the organization, I was serving in an operations capacity. And I said, hey, wow, okay, someone needs something like this. And over the last 5 years, we've partnered with a lot of high growth businesses to centralize the core company operating procedures and create operational assets for the business to be able to function really smoothly behind the scenes at scale. We've supported teams, we've supported profitable exits, multi-location spans, like all of these amazing projects. And in 2020, I had my very first son. His name is Frank, and he is so lovely. I was in year 3 of running my business, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, who tells me how much time I get off and who helps me prepare for all these things and how does this work? And so I obviously was still growing my business at the time, and I still am to this day. Operations Agency is still an integral part of the way I seek to be a change agent for small business owners. But ultimately what ended up happening was when I got pregnant with my second baby, John, he was born in March of last year. So he actually is going to be 1 here soon in a couple of weeks. But I was like, you know what, let me be a little bit more intentional about this. How can I structure the business operationally to be able to give me some agency over this experience that really feels good for me? Because when I took my first leave with my first son, I was like, man, I really want to do the 12-week thing. I really want to separate completely from the business. I had no idea what to expect. And I just wanted to be able to give myself an opportunity to press pause. And then like 4 weeks into leave, I was pulling my hair out being like, I need something that makes me feel tethered to the person I used to be before I had this baby. And so that was met with a lot of guilt and a lot of shame coming back in. And so when I had my second leave and I started structuring, I was like, how can mompreneurs be intentional about this so that everything doesn't fall apart behind the scenes, but also honor the way that they want to show up in their life and for their child and for themselves by planning a leave that actually feels good to them, right? Where maybe they are taking on some ad hoc tasks and they're having a neighbor or a family member or their husband watch the baby for a little while so that they can do some things that really excite them in the business. So that's how Master Maternity Leave was born. I also run a show for mompreneurs called Growing Pains. It's a podcast where I just interview moms doing all the things, running the business, growing the family, really navigating this life of, honestly, chaos and really, really impactful, spaces where we're just impacting like our clients and those businesses and those people's families and lives. And then we're also leaving a legacy of our own. So it can get overwhelming. It can get anxious at times, but my experience has been that the bigger plans you can put in place and the more, specifically you can stick to those plans, but also leave some time and some grace to be able to ad lib, find what is intuitively helpful to you. That's how we can kind of get through all of it together.
Yes. And I think one of the most important words that you said was agency. and giving moms that agency, because so often we feel that we're at the whim of the business or the company we work with, or at the whim of our family. And it's really a great reminder that we can steer the ship, you know, and really when we take that leadership, you know, really things turn out for the better. And really giving ourselves permission to not have to do everything the way people, you know, sometimes you even think it might not even be accurate. You just kind of assume that I'm supposed to be doing this or that, but checking in with yourself and checking in with your family about how you want it to go. Because I talked to somebody recently who said, you know, one of the difficult things is when we become mompreneurs is that we have this idea that we can still be the mom that we always were and run a business, but we have to have a give and take. You know? So it is just wonderful that you're being a leader for moms in that way. And what I think is so interesting about all that you do is sometimes I feel this myself, is I don't want to quite even say to people all that I do, because they just kind of go, what? How could you possibly do this and that in a podcast? And it's really tough. And it's among moms, it's among family members, because they kind of see you from their own limiting beliefs. And I'm really curious, and I don't want to make anyone feel like they're not doing enough. But if you have this ambition to do more and you are able to find the time and you're not killing yourself in the meantime to do it, then by all means pursue your passions and share your gifts, especially when you're doing things that impact people's lives for the better. Is that something you've kind of run into? And if so, how have you kind of dealt with that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it from my perspective. I think as I grow the business and as I grow as a leader, there's a renowned leadership coach. His name is John Maxwell. He's super well known, and he talks about this concept of the leader lid. And the leader lid is basically any small, his basic function of that is any small to medium-sized business only grows to the capacity of the founder's personal development. And so it's interesting because you start to think through ways of up-leveling the time that you're spending, B, the impact of that time, you know, C, the people that you empower and the legacy that you leave, whether that's your team, your family, your community, you know, anybody, right? And I think ultimately what we need to do is, first of all, say, I am where I am right now. So in a time where comparison is insanely relevant, right? Everyone is always seeing what so-and-so is doing on social media, or people seem farther ahead than you, or people seem to be having more fun or more impactful family. Just remember that your journey is unique. So in motherhood, in personal life, in business, in everything, it's all unique, and you are where you are right now. Things tend to happen at the exact right time, and they seem to happen when you're ready for them. And I think being patient and just getting through one more day, both in motherhood and in business, has been really helpful. And that applies to any new thing that you want to achieve, right? Don't start with the big thing, right? Don't go into things saying, well, you know, I want to have a 6-pack tomorrow, or whatever it is that your goal is, right? If you do those things, you're statistically actually going to fail. And I read this really interesting book a few years ago called The Motivation Myth. And it was really wonderful. And he talked about in the very beginning that inspiration doesn't just strike us, right? We don't wake up one morning and all of a sudden we're the person that owns 2 businesses and hosts a show and has a small family and all the things, right? We incrementally add those things to our plate and grow our capacity as we optimize some of the systems behind the scene that support us, because by no means am I alone. I have a wonderful partner. I have a wonderful community. I have a wonderful team. I have wonderful partners. and in the business. And like, it's really just about making small incremental changes that actually will optimize your day to day. So I know a lot of people who want to be a lot of things on paper, but they dread doing those tasks. And so ultimately, right, they're met with really draining days, and they're met with things that just don't aligned to them. And so what I start to say is, do you want to be that on paper, or do you want to be that in practice? And so that's always been a really helpful filter for me, because some things that I've thought I wanted to do, I'll start incrementally going down that path and I'll be like, wait a second, I don't like this at all. And so I think giving ourselves the grace to be wrong about some of the things that we might think we want, especially to like, just giving yourself the grace to really be objective about that and say, well, how is this making me feel? Because what might work for one person sure as heck might not work for you.
Right. No, definitely. And it's just like, I think I've seen, unfortunately, sometimes women kind of are very critical of women who do too much, because they see it as like a judgment on them. And it's not at all. It's like, consider it as an example of what's possible. And if that's something that you might feel compelled to do in some way, then maybe reach out to somebody and ask them, how do you do all of this?
Yeah. And I think something is interesting about that is, I find that women who are judgmental or meet other women with judgment around doing too much or all of those things usually find it very confronting, in the sense that they're holding up a mirror, right? They're like, oh, well, I always wish I could have done this thing, but I never got the momentum, or I never moved forward. And I think ultimately what we need to understand too, just even about ourselves and our shortcomings, is sometimes that creeps into my own mind. I'll have comparison. I'll take a look at what someone else has, or somebody else's life, or the way that they seem to be children, and I'll meet that with maybe a little bit of jealousy, or I'll meet that with something that is negative to me. And I always take a look back and I'm like, well, why do I feel like about this person? Why do I feel like that? Is it because I feel like I've been putting this off? Is it because I fundamentally disagree with some of the things that they're doing? Are those the messages? But usually it comes back to me. It usually comes back to, how am I showing up in my own life? Where do I feel like I've been valuing certain things, or not spending enough time? So I think developing that list of non-negotiables in your life will really help you determine, okay, do I even have time to do some of these other things, or the capacity to do some of these other things, right? So like for me, it's my relationship with my spouse, right? If we argue, or we seem out of sync, or we're not communicating in a way that like is actually leaving us feeling like we're spending a lot of quality time together, because we really value that in our relationship, if that's happening, then I know that something's wrong. Like something's absolutely wrong. If I'm blowing up on my kids all the time, if I'm yelling quite a bit, I usually also see that as a red flag, because that means that there's some other dormant stress living back in my mind, something I haven't figured out, something I haven't optimized. If I'm missing dinners, evenings with my family, if I'm, kind of burning the midnight oil, if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not getting enough water, if I'm not getting enough exercise, those are the basic functions for me to be able to show up as an actual contributing member of any scenario. And so those are the big things that I lean on. And I know it sounds really basic, but I think sometimes we forget to really be in a position to think through, what are my non-negotiables? What are the things that are making me really, really happy and filling up my cup so that I can present myself in the best way? And then the other thing that we also forget to do is time audit. So a lot of women who tell me I don't have enough time, or someone who makes a lot of, excuses about not being able to achieve things, I say, okay, well, how much TV do you watch? How much time do you spend on social media? And I know those are really confronting questions for some people, because I think a lot of us don't want to know the answer. But I said this to my husband in the beginning of the year. I was like, if we're really going to make our schedule work, he went back to school starting mid-January. I said, we need to eliminate TV, period, from our life, period. It's a small sacrifice, in my opinion, to be able to get hours back of time. Same thing with social media. I don't have it on my phone. My husband doesn't have it at all. And we just find hours and sometimes days back in our week, because we're not wasting time on these platforms. And I think ultimately what we want to just ask ourselves is some of those hard questions. How are we spending our time? And how are we really treating these non-negotiables in our life? Are we looking at water consumption and moving our body daily daily and sleep like they're
Right.
negotiable. Like that's that's crazy to me sometimes. And I do it. I'll fall into the trap.
Yeah.
And then you just need to constantly reassess how that's going and try to pivot, when you can. So give yourself some grace
Mm-hmm.
because we're all human beings, and just
Right.
realize, those are the things that we need to make sure that we hold true, and talk to people in your life about that. Talk to your spouse, talk to your family, talk to your
Yeah.
team, tell them, hey, if I don't get 8 hours, I'm not going to be able to be present on this meeting.
That is a lesson I learned very recently. My husband has been trying to get me to sleep more for years. We've been together for
Mm,
20 years and he's always said it. And this year I was creating my schedule and he's like, make sure you schedule in 8 hours of sleep. And I was like, what?
brilliant.
I
Your
know.
husband's a
And I'm
brilliant
like,
man.
and create the schedule around that? What?
Hmm. Hmm.
And lo and behold, I'm way more productive. I'm way happier. He's like, see, I told you.
That's what spouses are best at doing, giving amazing advice, and then the other one ignores it forever. And then as soon as they implement it, you'd be like, I told you so.
Yes, there is a
I'll be here
constant
accepting
rhythm
my
of
award.
that. Yes. And when I realized I was not listening to my husband about a lot of wise things, I had a podcast with a speaker about that because he's married to an entrepreneur as well. And, we talked about that because there's this whole, we're going on a little sidetracking, but there is this whole sense of like, especially if you're married to somebody who's not an entrepreneur, you don't understand. But, sometimes they have wise things to say. But
Honestly, partners of entrepreneurs need their own mastermind or something, because the amount of times I've walked downstairs and like disrupted my husband's entire day, like the flow of ideas that I have about these new things, he could probably vent for a long time.
yep. Yep. Of course. Yep. And that is a good segue into what I wanted to talk to you about in our shared experience as military spouses or being connected to the
Yes.
military. And gosh, I wish I would have had some structure for my own like PCSs, which seem to both be connected with having a baby for some reason. I mean, what the heck? And then
Mm,
I always had to transfer jobs and you know I had to become an entrepreneur just because like in my industry nobody wanted somebody who had moved down around a lot until it was many years
mm.
later and they went, oh, that's really helpful. Wait a minute. but but yeah, so as military spouses it struck me how much after my husband retired from the military the conversation around leadership is just lacking. And it's just something we're continually aware of, not only in the events that we go to and the training that our spouses have to go through and whatnot, but yeah, I'm really curious about your perspective on that and how that conversation around leadership has impacted you.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think it's a really interesting point to kind of bring up, because I think one of the really interesting things about Steve's military career was that he had he had several really intense trainings, but two specifically about leadership. It was basic leadership course and advanced leadership course. He was away for 3 months at a time for each of those courses, and he would leave and go through the trainings, and both in, class and kind of in physical training. And he would return from those completely out of the day-to-day operations of his 9 to 5 job in the military, and he would be met with promotions and pay raises and more folks to be leading and those types of things. And so I started thinking through this experience through the new lens of, obviously prepping for maternity leave. And I was like, why aren't women in the workplace met with really similar, opportunities? I think we both can probably agree, and I'm sure any mom listening here, any parent, let's just say, learns transferable leadership skills, becoming a parent and managing a household. Like my time that I manage and the effectiveness of how I spend my time now versus when I was 25 pre-kids and 21 pre-kids is absolutely night and day difference. I have a different way that I approach different folks on my team because they need different things. And as you're raising children, you understand that people communicate differently and you need to be empathetic and patient and clear and firm in some cases and lenient in other cases. And so it's interesting to me that women are met with this lack of opportunity. I saw a post on LinkedIn that I mentioned on another show I was on recently that they called the mom's pregnant belly a career ender.
Yeah.
And
I worked for law
I sat
firms
there
that actually
aghast.
told women, you have children, you will not make partner.
It's incredible to me that that exists, A, currently,
Yeah.
and B, that businesses haven't recognized the opportunity, which is one of the big missions I have with Master Maternity Leave, is really to take a look at this as an opportunity because so many organizations are faced with the hard reality that someone quits on them. No notice, they don't come back to work. That person might be integral to the organization and outgoes all of that knowledge, outgoes all of that, work ethic and all the things. And they're just left in the lurch. And I have served organizations in this capacity. And let me tell you something, it is not a fun position to be in at any stage. If you're on the team with a person who has left, if you're a manager of a person who's left, if you're a leader of an organization, I think that it is probably one of the biggest things, especially in small to medium sized businesses, when you really feel the weight of somebody leaving. Now, what if we approached maternity leave like my husband's military training in the sense that we know that they're going to go and learn new leadership skills that they can come back and apply and be helpful and mothering. I mean, my goodness, I have a brand new gal who just joined my team this week. And one of the main reasons that we offered her a position to come and work with us is because I felt like she's in a customer support role. She was just taking care of me. She listened to what I had to say. She was empathetic. She really demonstrated solid skills. And I was like, this person is mothering me and she is going to mother our clients through this process. And I don't know why, it is met with such a negative stigma. And I think that's the big thing in terms of military that I took away is that ultimately at the end of the day, you can completely drop your day-to-day responsibilities, completely drop them, like leave offsite. Mm-hmm. I mean, when the men aren't in person, they're not working, and still be able to learn transferable skills to come back and up-level yourself in your career, when you come back.
Just hearing you say that, it just makes me tear up because it's 100% true. And I, coming from a male dominated industry, I remember before the pandemic, just almost having to hide the fact that I had kids. I mean, I worked virtually for a long time because it was a non-negotiable for me when my husband had to TDY or whatever. Mm-hmm. To be there for them. And so, I actually positioned myself so that, attorneys treated me like an adult. That was, one hurdle. But then it was, they can't know I'm a mother. They can't know I have children. Like if I'm on a video, but now, I mean, the pandemic was a terrible, difficult time for many people. But one of the silver linings is people realize we are people. We have lives and we have family, and we get to see that, and it actually creates a better culture. And like you said, I really truly hope that people see that as an opportunity for leadership and, seeing a different aspect of someone, not like, oh, they have kids, they're going to ask to take off and they're going to, no, you want somebody to do something, ask a busy person. It's,
yeah. It's
I
funny too, because it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier about reassessing whether or not you have time or capacity for something. A lot
right.
of times, I think when business owners make a hire of a mom or a parent of young kids, and they understand that, they're going to be met with, doctor's appointments or early school pickups or flexible work schedules, they get nervous because they know that behind the scenes, their stuff isn't all pulled together to be able to support a schedule like that. They constantly micromanage their team. They need to be pulled into every conversation or have 1,000 meetings or whatever needs to work. And my hope is that through our programs and services and with the support of a clear operational structure, we're able to give that agency not only to mompreneurs and moms who can plan their own leaves, but also to business owners, because I know a lot
Yes.
of good-hearted owners who want to provide these opportunities for working moms, but they just don't know how. They don't know how to justify it financially. They don't know how to justify it operationally. And it's just a really, really mysterious part of running a business and a people
Right.
operations element. And so my hope is that if we can just create a better conversation and a comfortability here to say, all right, here are the things we need to have in place in order to support you through this transition and be able to up level you in the organization, whether you're running it or whether you're an employee, that is a huge, huge, huge improvement from where we are now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any conversation around that. And two, if you have a parent who is given the space and the freedom to take care of what they need to, they are going to be
Mm-hmm.
forever loyal to you.
Oh,
And
couldn't agree more.
they are just going to feel respected and appreciated and on a different level than you could in many other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, just the fact that you're working on that conversation means a lot to me, even though I create my own schedule. I mean, I just so much of my heart, had I had that at that time in my life where I needed that, I might not have been pushed to become an entrepreneur, but I mean, I know a lot of people don't have that belief in themselves that they can
Mm-hmm.
have agency and do their own thing. And at some point, it's just not even worth working for somebody and trying to figure that out when you just really need to take care of your family. It's incredible that you've created this opportunity to have that conversation because it's so important. I mean, that's people's livelihoods. I mean, they spend
Mm-hmm.
more time at work and putting energy into their work. All they want to do is feel appreciated, fulfilled, and then take care of their family. That's it. you know
Absolutely. And transparently, I mean, I knew this when I became a mom, and it caused me to reassess a lot of the other ways I spent my time, whether that's with relationships or hobbies or work.
mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
take a look at, is the time that I'm spending away from my family truly making an impact that will then bring around a better world for my kids to live in, right? And
Right.
so that, as a mom and as a parent at large, that's what we're constantly reassessing. Am I making this place better for them to work in? And is my job or my business or my time that I'm spending outside of the home, is that serving that overall purpose? And I think
Right.
if we're able to support moms through this transition, business owners will find that moms will be re-enlisted in the company mission, vision,
Mm-hmm.
values. They'll be a bleeding heart for this organization, because if we've re-enlisted post this transition, it means that the mom really does believe in the impact that the organization's making.
Right.
And I agree with you. I think it can strengthen the relationship and keep that mom for a really long time.
Yeah, yeah, and the cost of finding somebody new
Yes.
and rebuilding that knowledge base, and there's so many impacts. I mean, it's just so
Mm-hmm.
short-sighted
Mm-hmm.
to not consider all of those things. But let's talk about if there is somebody listening who is in the position where they are beginning to think about preparing maternity leave. Where can moms begin? Like, what do you think are some of the mindset shifts or the things that they need to begin to think about to give themselves agency?
Yeah, totally. I think starting with a time audit is probably going to be the best thing to do. You can find so many things, right? What am I doing daily, weekly, monthly? How is this working out? Who might I need to source? Even if you're a mompreneur or if you're employed at an organization,
Mm-hmm.
even just having that real conversation with yourself to really readjust how you're spending your time and think through what could this look like post baby. I know that it's really, really challenging to know all of the things, all the curveballs that babies can
Oh,
bring our
yes.
way and all the things. But the thing that my husband and I actually always joke about is that we always say that there will always be a schedule. The only constant is that it will always be different, right? So every
Yes.
day it's always different. And so we have these, I'm actually looking over at my calendar right now because I have like time blocked out for specific things that I group in specific categories.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those need to change. Sometimes it's weekly. Sometimes I actually never get through what I call the perfect week. Because of the fact that something happens, or Steve gets an opportunity, or I get an opportunity, or my kids are sick, or someday, like yesterday, I know it was a President's Day, but I had some time and I had some things that I wanted to do for the day. And in the afternoon, I was like, I'm just going to sit here and read my book for a second because I just felt like at that time, that's what I needed. And so start with a time audit and really start to think through how do you spend your time. And the second layer that I would put on the time audit is just to make sure that you're adding a kind of note to say, this brings me energy or this doesn't bring me energy, right? So at the end of the day, what we want to look at is we want to say, okay, what are those high energy tasks that we really enjoy doing? And what are the tasks that are really just sucking the life out of us and bringing us down? And one of my partners and amazing author and coach, his name is Dan Martell. He has this book called Buy Back Your Time. And he talks about this time and energy audit in a way that I feel is really eloquent. And it's kind of a version of the way that we've been serving people too, in just really being accountable to this is how I spend my time. Here's how I'm going to audit how that's going. And here's how I'm going to delegate some of those things and then
Mm-hmm.
fill my time back up with things that actually do bring me energy. So the filling part could be time spent with your baby, time spent with your spouse, time spent filling up your own cup and doing some things that you are really interested and intrigued in. And I think ultimately what I want to do is encourage moms specifically to safeguard the personal time that you have post baby, because I think so many moms just feel this servitude toward their family and toward the baby and all the things, right? And so I remember with Frank, my older son, I had no idea what it was going to be like. I had no idea what was going to happen post baby. So what I did, and I'm a planner to the nth degree. I have everything
I can
scheduled.
tell.
And what I did, I was like, the best way that I
Yeah.
can really be present and really figure out how this is going to go is just to
Mm-hmm.
block it. Like, I just need to take 12 weeks off, and that's what I need to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
reassessed multiple times. I was like, how is this going? What's happening here? And the things that I found the most difficult to find, because I didn't do them ahead of time, was time for myself and time for my spouse. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that ultimately what ended up happening is I was with the baby 24/7. I felt like I wasn't exactly sure how to take time for me, when to take time for me, what that looked like. And so what we were left with, my husband and I, was always in this state of, well, you get to do everything and I'm always stuck with the baby. And then that was kind of a perpetual initial conversation between the two of us. And it wasn't fair because I had no idea how to advocate for myself. I had no idea what I wanted. I had no idea what time I wanted to spend. So even if, and with my second son, I didn't really know what that was going to look like either, because we had just moved into a new home and we were renovating. And I remember saying, I need 30 minutes to take a shower every morning. That's what I need. You have all the postpartum care and all the things that you need to do and all the time that you want for yourself. I just need 30 minutes to take a shower, compile my thoughts, not feel rushed through that process, get myself together and come downstairs. And it needs to happen early in the morning. It needs to happen like maybe after the first feeding or to kind of start the day. And so even just that small thing
Mm-hmm.
really helped me be in a better mental state through kind of my postpartum period with my second son. Because I think as you're fighting for this time, if it's not scheduled and it's not intentional, it's going to just get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back with all the
Yep.
other urgent things that are happening with the baby. And
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to feel like you actually are filling up your cup. So you're constantly going to be operating from a space of just absolute, your battery is going to be empty. Let's just say
Yeah.
it's going to be completely drained.
I can identify with that. But I have this saying that being a mompreneur changes your relationship with time. But I think also being a mom changes your relationship with time. And I think a lot of women kind of see people like you and maybe me as time management is just not for me. Like, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to do that. Like, that's for somebody else, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we tell ourselves certain stories, all the time, about things that we just don't know how to do. Or so, what do you think are some, and definitely like advocating for ourselves, that is always a difficult thing. But what do you think are maybe some tips that we can give a mom who might be feeling some of that resentment and being totally depleted and not really knowing where to begin or even how to approach advocating for themselves? I don't know.
Yeah, great question. First thing I would do is acknowledge where you are to the
Yeah.
person closest to you in your life. So if that's your spouse, just say, hey, listen, I really
Mm-hmm.
feel like I can't advocate for what I want right now. And it's not because of anything you're doing, it's because I don't know what I want.
Right.
That's fine. And that's totally fine. And I
Yeah.
said that literally out loud to my husband. I think my son was like 6 months old at the time. So we had
Mm-hmm.
been going through it for a little while.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know what I need. And you need to just help me
Mm-hmm.
figure this out. And we just need to figure it out together because
Right.
this is all new. And so even just starting there and acknowledging, like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. And I don't know how to figure this out. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, our community wants to support us. So whether that's your spouse, whether that's a friend, whether that's your mom,
Right.
whether it's your brother or sister, someone is going to be there to help you kind of through this transition. And I
Mm-hmm.
think identifying that, teeing that person up ahead of time and just being like, hey, listen, I might not know everything, but perhaps I could lean on you at times to either help take the baby from me for a
Right.
second or even just be an ear to listen to perhaps some of the ways that I'm processing some of my feelings, because that was another thing I did not do with my first son. Is I had no idea the mental capacity and all of the hormones and all of the things that were going to be happening. And so I always just thought, well, I'm a mostly even keeled person. And this, I'm not going to struggle with any sort of postpartum issues, and I'm not going to have anxiety, and I'm not going to be sad from time to time. And sure enough, there it was. I was anxious. I was sad.
Sure.
And I didn't realize that it was because I wasn't doing things to fill up my cup and I wasn't doing things for me. I was also very restless.
Mm-hmm.
I process things in motion. That's just how I operate. And I've learned this about
Hmm.
myself through motherhood, is that I'm not a meditator. I usually, if I can kind of clear my brain, it's when I'm running. So I'll be like in motion. My brain physically
Hmm.
can't like process everything because it's just trying to keep all of the lights on while I'm running. And so that's when I get like moments of
I see.
clarity.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that about
Hmm.
myself. I was always kind of taking all the practices of others, and I would steady my breath and try to use the whiteboard method and like rub the writing off of the whiteboard and try and clear my thoughts in
Hmm.
my mind. And I would always get so frustrated that I couldn't do it. And so something I'll
Hmm.
say is acknowledge where you are, tell your closest person, say, I don't know what I want, don't know how to advocate for myself. Second
Yeah.
is don't just take what other people are telling you as the end all truth for what you quote unquote should do, right? Because
Yes.
everybody's journey is different and everybody can create the life that they desire. And it takes time, but ultimately, right, what works for one person is going to work for another person. And it's the same thing that you can take into being a mom, right? You're the perfect mom for your child, and there is no one size fits all way to grow a family, just like there's no one size fits all way to run a business. And so what
Mm-hmm.
we have to do is just bring our gifts to the table and say, what can we do today to maybe alleviate some of this pain? And so don't try to, the third thing I'll say is don't try to do too much too soon, right? Because we can
Mm-hmm.
get burnt out. We can say, all right, I'm going to go to therapy, or I'm going to do this other thing to fill up my cup. And then we kind of jam it into our schedule and it feels like another thing. And then the
Mm-hmm.
likelihood of us keeping up with it is going to be really low. So try to do
Mm-hmm.
like a 15-minute small thing, or like I said, my 30-minute like luxurious shower. I'd be like, I'm going to take a long shower every morning. I'm going to get really centered, and then I can be nice and present with my family and with my
Mm-hmm.
baby. And then that looked different after week 2. 2 weeks, I did my shower time. And then after week 2, I was like, okay, I got my shower time. And then I'm going to work for 2 hours every day in the afternoons when,
Mm-hmm.
my husband's with the baby. So then you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of incrementally add in different things into the schedule and just try them on, see how they feel, right? Instead of kind of overloading with, I'm going to roll out this new schedule, or I'm going to roll out this new time management activity. Ultimately, what you want to do is just like, training for a marathon. You don't want to go out and run the marathon on day
Mm-hmm.
one, right? You might run 1 mile one day. Or if you're in a position where you don't have a ton of experience in this exercise, you might just go for a really long walk and see if that feels good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That first
Right.
day, it's okay to just gain momentum.
No, yeah, I think just giving ourselves grace. And, I kind of fell into this trap of like, when I had little ones, it was like girls' night out. And I'm not a girls' night out person. And I tried it several times and I'm like, I don't know.
That's
So
so
it's
funny.
true. Like you said, I mean, it's like I would rather be at home spending time with my family or doing something on my own or something where somebody doesn't need me or,
Yes. That's so funny. We say this all the time. Actually, a lot of the folks I follow and our immediate community, they're like, oh, you guys have to do date nights. Always, my husband and I have heard date night, date night, date night. And it's just not for us. We spend a lot of quality time at home. We have our pockets of
yeah,
time where we really enjoy each other's company and the things that we do together. And we don't feel like we need to go outside of the home to get that time and like prioritize that time
yeah,
for us.
yeah,
And some couples like really, really love date night. They go out once a week and they go get fancy and it's like super fun for them. We just never have had that as kind of our main way that we function. And honestly, like even I'm
yeah.
sure you can relate, being in the military, it was kind of always like date night because he was home 50% of the time and he wasn't home the other 50% of the time. So then when he was home, we really
Yeah,
learned how to prioritize that time because he would be gone 50% of the time. So I feel like we built that muscle in our
yeah,
relationship to be like, hey, the time that we're spending together, we're going to be present. We're going to be talking to each other. We're not going to be looking at our phones or whatever else.
right.
And so that's
Hmm.
something I think that couples perhaps miss, and an opportunity that we had as
Yeah.
spouses of military men, because we're just
Because
like,
we're the
oh
same
gosh,
way.
they're
We're
home.
just
Yeah.
like, what's with the day night? Like,
Yeah.
I don't, we like to spend time with our kids. We do. It's like we,
Hmm.
especially as they get older, you realize this is limited time. This
It
is
moves
not
so
forever.
fast. It's so
Yeah.
crazy. It's funny that you mentioned before, like mom's perception of time changes when they become
Mm-hmm.
moms. And
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that so much. And I've actually been kind of trying to read into this. And
Mm-hmm.
I've read about this thing called like experience saturation,
Mm.
where if you're living like really interestingly and new things are happening to you all the time or
Mm-hmm.
happening for you all the time, and you're, filling up your schedule and you're experiencing your kids' first steps and everything,
Mm-hmm.
it like saturates your time and it moves faster. And where we
Right.
felt like when we were younger, we weren't experiencing like
Mm-hmm.
as many new things
Mm-hmm.
in like our 20s and whatnot, right? It was kind of, at least for me, like decently cyclical. I was like going to work, maybe hanging out at the bar with our friends or like going to dinner, and then we would come home and go to sleep. It was like very routine. And
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't move as fast. And it's
Right.
it's interesting. I'm still like baking kind of my thoughts on some of these things, but as moms, you really are, you're experiencing so many things, especially like my sons. I mean, one morning Frank wakes up and he just like knows a new word. I'm like, where did you learn this? Like, where did you learn this new word or this new
Yeah.
phrase? Or he'll say something and I'll look back at myself and be like, oh, I guess I do say that a lot. And so it's a lot of like heavy, saturated experience and also lots of reflection. And so I just feel like by the time I come up for air from all of my thoughts and experiences, it's like 8 p.m. and it's time to go to bed.
Right. And wait until you start experiencing that from more than one little mind's perspective. And you have two that are kind of telling
Yes.
you things and meeting you on different levels. It's very interesting. I think one of the important things too that I just feel like compelled to say is it's so important that we begin to master how we feel, because as mothers, we need to translate that for our children. That's one of the most important tasks. And that kind of begins even before they're born, just kind of trying to identify, like, okay, this is stressing me out or whatever on my use of my time or whatnot. So definitely, you don't have to be the victim to how you're using your time. You really can take control of it. And I think I loved
Mm-hmm.
your tips. Those are really great things. I wish I would have met you way sooner. I really want to talk about some of the limiting beliefs that you might have had to address, because I think it's so important to kind of get an emotional kind of connection with where people had to process things in the early days, because it's so easy to look at somebody and see, well, look at them, of course they're, they've got it together, but it's, you don't see all the work, the emotional and physical late nights and all that stuff that went into that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share like some of your darkest moments and how you kind of overcame that? Because we all have them as
Yes.
mompreneurs.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I was talking about this leader lid concept and
Mm,
thinking through, like, you really do need to be in a constant state of reassessment and figuring out like what works for you and what doesn't work
mhm.
for you. And just have the confidence. I mean, you don't have a boss, you don't have a safety net. So
Yeah.
you have neither of both. And a lot of people will romanticize you don't have anybody to answer to,
Right.
or you don't have anybody kind of holding you back. But at the end of the day, it's you. It all comes down to how you're able to advocate for yourself, support yourself. And
Hmm.
so I think that one of the biggest things that I've always had to deal with is thinking that I wasn't worthy of being followed, right? I always thought of myself as a component of a functioning team, but never necessarily a leader of a team or somebody that
Mm.
someone perhaps would look to for guidance or source of truth or any of those things. And so I had to do a lot of internal work and think about, like, well, what specifically might that person look like? What might they do? Who might they be? And
Yeah.
so I think ultimately I learned actually from a coach early on, that there's this kind of a function of kind of how you grow into new areas of your life. And he
Mm.
talked about this ladder of be, do, have. A lot of people start the other way. They'll say, well, once I have these things, then I'll be doing the things that successful people do, and then I'll be the person that I need to be in order to achieve this or whatever.
Hmm.
And so flipping that on its head, he talked about, well, be that person first, right? Regulate your emotions, be calm, communicate in a way that leads people to be better, really be intentional about how you spend your time and what information you consume, and how you really are sharpening that axe behind the scenes and optimize for the day to day. And so I think as a function, and I currently live this, I still audit my time at least once a quarter, and I always do it after I've had a really stressful week. Like if I'm just like, whoa, this week took a hold of me, what might have happened in in those moments, and how might I have shown up a little bit better?
Hmm.
It's constant. And I have my days. I mean, I am absolutely in a position sometimes where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, over the fall, when I launched Master Maternity Leave for the first
Hmm.
time, I
Hmm.
literally thought to myself, I was like, I'm floundering so much. Maybe I should just give this all up. Maybe I should just go and update my resume and really support another team operationally and be a COO and just stay in my lane and do that thing. Because when you're running your own shop, not only does everything lean on you, but you've got your hand in sales and marketing and product development and operations and systems and finance. Like all of a sudden, you have to be you have to have an acumen in several different functions that you didn't originally start this business to have an acumen in. And so it's a constant state of refining and just growing into your own level of confidence. And some days that looks like a complete breakdown. Like I remember on my husband's birthday this year, because his birthday's in October, I was going through a lot. I was like, I don't know what the next iteration of my business is going to be. And we celebrated 5 years of operations agency in October. So
Mm,
I'd been doing this for a long time.
right.
Traditionally speaking, right? Like longer
Hmm.
than lots
Yeah,
of businesses stay in
sure.
business.
Yeah.
And I literally looked at him and I was like, I don't know what this is going to look like. And I'm scared. I have no idea what's next. I really don't. And I knew that the business as it's currently operating for the agency was not going to work the way that it was working. I had, the kids to support, and we knew that we had like a 4-month expiration on when he was going to be starting school. And I was just
Mm,
like, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know how we're going to do this. And we have some very incredibly exciting goals on our personal front and for our
hmm
family. And I was like, and my business is one of the main funders of some of those dreams and some of those
hmm
goals. And I said to him, I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm scared. And I feel like I want to fold up shop. And I remember he looked at me and he said, this is going to pass. He was like, and this is just your moment of doubt and shame. He was like, that's what it comes down to. He was like, this is your moment of doubt and shame. He said, and other things are ahead around the corner. And I'll never be more thankful for him. Well, I'm thankful for him for so many reasons, but like in that moment, it's exactly what I needed to hear to keep pushing forward. And I knew that
hmm
even if I didn't believe in me, if he believed in me, then I still had something going, right? I still was able to, I thought, get it together and keep moving forward. So,
Right.
look, we're here out several months later. So
Yeah.
not like this gigantic transformation story, but I have remodeled my entire business at operations agency, and we have
hmm
new staff members coming on that are going to help us with this new model. And I feel
hmm
like I just got off a call earlier with Lauren on my team. She is such a lovely supporter and been with me for about 3 years.
hmm
And we talked about some of the new ways that we're changing things in the business. And so I even think that, again, it didn't happen all overnight. I finally feel like I have the clarity that I needed back in October at this point
hmm
when I was like really reaching my brink. And I feel really reinvigorated about the mission of the business and my position in it and the positions of my team members and our clients and all of that. And additionally speaking, like being able to just accept that these times are going to come every single time we're met with change in the positive,
Yeah.
right? Life pushes back on us when it doesn't
Right.
think we're ready for what's next.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what happens.
And I mean, you can almost, I know in my business, when I have moments like that, it's like those moments I've learned to recognize that they precede greatness.
Absolutely.
Because it is when your anxiety kicks in, that's when you know things are leveling up, and you're just afraid.
It's
But
scary.
yeah.
It's scary because you don't have that net and you don't have that person like dragging you along. Like there's no
Oh
boss
yeah.
being like, this is the trajectory for the year. You're just like,
Yep.
okay, I guess I gotta get hungry and humble.
Yep. Yep. No, I had moments like that this weekend because I'm going to new levels and places, and it just feels really scary, but it's great. So you just have to surrender. It's like,
You can rise together.
all right, yeah. I've loved your story in this conversation, and I think I can't wait to hear. I hope people reach out and let us know how much it resonated with them, because I think it's the story of so many women, whether they're mompreneurs or moms. For a moment, can you imagine if there's somebody out there who's not sure whether they want to take that leap to be their own business owner and think that they cannot juggle both? Can you imagine had you not taken that leap of faith? We almost had to. We were forced in that position
Mhm.
as military spouses. But do you see that as a gift, and how it's made you a better person and perhaps mother?
Yeah, I sure do. I think owning my business has made me a better spouse, a
Mhm.
better person overall, a better mom. I think that learning to exercise the muscle of trusting yourself, betting on yourself, investing in yourself, and just really being in a position to say, I am the agent of change in my life. I can make
Right.
my life better, my spouse's life better, my family's life better, my community's life. It just really is up to you. And you're the author of your story. And I think for some who've had this revelation and been putting it into practice for years are for a little bit further along than some, but it doesn't take a lot to begin. It really doesn't. It doesn't take a lot to begin to be an agent of change of your own life and just take ownership over the things, that you're doing. And I think for a long time, we're taught that we need to stay in a specific box or we need to check all the items off the checklist and achieve certain things. And ultimately, there is no one size fits all way to pretty much do anything in life. I think as I get older and become an adult and as I am raising a family and all of that, I keep thinking back to like, wow, okay, so my mom didn't have it all together. The doctors have no idea what they're talking about. The lawyers have no idea what they're talking about. So we're just all people trying to figure this out together. And the only constant there is us, right? Like we're the one. We have to make the decisions and put them into action and show up intentionally and do all the things. And so it can be overwhelming at times, but again, just starting somewhere and starting as soon as possible, starting today,
Right.
is the ticket.
Yeah. If anybody needed permission to take agency of their own life, you just gave it to them.
I hope so. I really
Yes.
do.
I mean, 100%. So I guess with that, one more question. If you had any takeaway, that might be it. That somebody listening to this podcast, if they remembered one thing, what is that thing you would want them to just kind of hang on to?
Yeah. I think I was at an event recently that I really enjoyed. And one of the speakers said that everything happens at the exact right time. And I think that we can take that in the positive and we can take that in the negative, right? If you feel like, you just happen to always fall pregnant whenever you're PCSing or, you know what I mean?
Right.
When life feels crazy and everything feels like it's happening all at
That
once, right?
means I
We have
didn't
to
have to
remember that
pack.
everything happens.
Sorry.
No, it's great. And I think, like I mentioned, like everything happens at the
Right.
exact right time. So even in the negative, right? If you feel like you should be farther along now, you should have some, things, success, quote unquote, in your life, everything happens at the exact right time. And you just need to, have the grace to be able to open up yourself to the capacity of all the things happen at once. And also the patience to be able to make it one more day. Because I think for me, I always have been a capacity person. I always take things and do them all at once. And I open up several loops. And I've always been really comfortable at operating in chaos. But when I have to sit and wait, it's hard for me. It's really hard for me. And I think I've always been able, because I'm a bullish, determined person, I've always been able to knock down walls and like use my force to get through to the next level of things just from sheer strength and will. And with motherhood and with business ownership, that'll get you to some places, but it won't get you to all the places. It won't get you to that emotional regulation. It won't get you to that leadership that your team is craving. And it won't get you to the sustainability that you need to be able to make both work long term. And so everything happens at the exact right time.
Yes, no, I think that's great, especially at a time when we can so easily fall into the trap of the algorithm and comparing ourselves. You really just have to run your own race.
Yeah.
So, Alyson, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And, I so am I 1,000% support what you're working on and doing. And please don't close up shop. It's so important. So you're feeling like that again, just listen to this interview. Don't give up. Don't stop.
Oh, thank you.
With that, can you tell everybody where they can connect with you and find you?
Yeah, sure. I'm on the social at Master Maternity Leave and at Operations Agency, you can all head over to our website, so mastermaternityleave.com. That'll give the program overview, the free checklists there for any moms who are starting down this journey. The time audit is started, taking an assessment of your time. I can surely support you there. But yeah, I'm super easy to get in touch with on all the platforms and things. And honestly, I love supporting moms. So if you had anything really resonated with you and listening today, I would love to hear it.
Yeah. And your podcast again, where can they listen to your podcast? Growing Pains.
Growing Pains podcast. Yes.
I
love that show so much. And honestly, I always joke with all my guests.
I want to sing the song
now. Actually, my husband named the show. Shout out to the amazing part. If we haven't done this so many times in the show, I was like, hey, I'm going to launch a podcast and interview moms who are running businesses and growing families at the same time. And we had this really funny brainstorming session where I came up with 10 titles and he came up with one title. And I was like, just come up with 10 titles. And he came up with one title. We shared it with each other, and his was the one that went through Growing Pains. And I was like, I was like, you sat on this for 20 minutes? I was like, why didn't you tell me immediately? Because that was the one.
That is great. I do love that name. All right, Alyson, thank you so much. And I can't wait to continue the conversation on your podcast. That'll be awesome. So I'll definitely spread the word for that when that happens.
Thanks, Angela. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, a million times over, for your time, Alyson. I enjoyed the conversation so much, and I hope you did too. I am going to leave all of Alyson's contact information in the links below. Please reach out and let us know if this podcast episode resonated with you, helped you in some way. That really means so much to Alyson and I. It just fills my bucket to have conversations like this that are just really making an impact and difference in women's lives and moms' lives and mom business owners' lives. So thank you again to Alyson. If you would like to reach out to me, you can reach me on Instagram at angela.masciulli. That's MASCIULLI. Send me a DM, make a post, tag me in it. You can also reach me at mombusinesscoach.com or hello@mombusinesscoach.com. And I cannot wait to bring you my next interview next week with an amazing mompreneur. Another special episode is coming to you. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. It's completely free. And I want to let you know something. We all have those moments of self-doubt and wonder whether we are good enough. And if you are listening to this podcast and having one of those moments, I just want to let you know that you are not only good enough, you're probably overqualified. So do not forget that. The purpose of this podcast is to empower women in motherhood and business. And if you don't have one person who believes in you or has faith in you, I do. I absolutely have seen women do such extraordinary things. And you don't always have confidence at first. You have to do the things that demonstrate that you're capable, and then you build confidence. So if you're in that spot, I 100% believe in you and you've got this. Thank you again so much for listening. I'm your host, Angela Masciulli of the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. I cannot wait to talk to you next week. Have a great one. Bye.